Slipknot has an amazing discography. That discography has been going strong for decades, and it was in the late 90s through the early 2010s that the public realized what they were getting into due to the self-titled debut and sophomore release, Iowa. These two albums are pillars of Slipknot's identity, massive albums showcasing the creativity in heavy music, and everyone always seems to try and figure out which one they enjoy more. Deciding between the two is a harder decision than I thought it would be. We live in a world of comparisons, but this video is going to prove that it can be done in a positive and constructive way. So let's see if I can break down why they are both great and if I prefer either the self-titled or Iowa. I'll give a brief description about each album, but if you clicked on this video, you are probably already somewhat familiar with both albums, but some of you may not be. However, I'm pretty sure you're already aware of Slipknot if you click this video, so I'm going to save the intro on the band. Released June 1999, Slipknot's self-titled release was an album that must have scared Roadrunner executives senseless, but with the help and assurance of Ross Robinson, we were introduced to a nu metal band with a fresh coat of horror painted off their collected faces. Nu metal bands can't even fantasize about gaining popularity and success as this self-title received. Nu metal was shown in an aggressive and catchy way without being all about the typical nu metal tropes of 1999. This was as musically driven and lyrically focused as you can imagine, and the two singles Wait and Bleed and Spit It Out became cult classics to the point of mainstream radio having to relent and play Slipknot due to demand, leading to movie soundtrack spots and TV appearances. This self-titled opened the floodgates. One of my favorite reviews back then was from Rick Anderson of AllMusic. You thought Limp Bizkit was hard? They're the Osmonds. These guys are something else entirely, and it's pretty impressive. Think about trying to describe nu metal chaos in the 90s and then describing Slipknot compared to nu metal. Slipknot used influences like Mike Patton and wrote to have melody along with the aggression to not only make big hits but to stand out in the 90s surge of rock and metal bands all trying to sound tough, but still not coming close to Slipknot. This album that made names like Corey Taylor, Sid Wilson, Jim Root, Clown, everyone, all of them instant stars. The self-titled release was in many ways an inspiration for heavy music. Creative individuals trying to make something unique with massive replay value. Heavy, but not so heavy as it would shy away new listeners not used to the aggression. The cover had people not giving the album a chance, but the music made those same naysayers into fans. Released August 2001, Iowa was the follow-up to the self-titled album that met the impossible expectations of fans and critics. Iowa doubled down on the ferocity. The riffs and overall rhythm of each song became faster while darkening the tone. Iowa instantly became proof that Slipknot is here to stay. Iowa is all about that darker, almost suffocating feeling from beginning to end. Members of Slipknot were going through a rough time personally, and I feel the creation of Iowa was a needed outlet for many of them. Pair that with the Nine trying to live up to the set expectation for a sophomore release, and you cannot have anything less than gigantic. One of the best viewpoints of Iowa during its creation came from Clown. When we did Iowa, we hated each other. We hated the world hated us. In turn, Slipknot made something that fans cherished and the world further realized who they were dealing with. Heavy album meant to be a front-to-back experience. Metaphors for days, emotional range far past just anger, including disgust, misery, even psychosis. This is an album that expanded past nu metal when nu metal was still the big thing, having shades of subgenres like hardcore and death metal. On paper, Iowa seemed like Slipknot was trying to get too big too quickly. When most bands try to change or go bigger in theme and scope, it can divide fan bases. Iowa just created more fans while keeping previous fans happy. The impossible dream. Corey Taylor continued to impress, and Joy Jordison gave the performance of a lifetime here. His creativity at the drum kit put the percussion on Slipknot into the stratosphere, and Iowa shows that across the board. In making a decision like this, I wanted to list off what I see as some of the differences between the two albums. I'm not saying any of these differences are necessarily bad, but there are a few qualities that make me distinguish between the self-titled and Iowa. First, the overall tone lyrically is significantly darker in Iowa. That's not to say the self-titled doesn't get dark, but the self-titled also has bright, groove-filled moments filled with energy, but not in a truly horrifying way. Iowa can get legit horrifying at parts. Second, the production level on Iowa is much cleaner. The polish shows off the members of Slipknot in their own bright light, where the self-titled is a rawer production style that shows off that late 90s nu metal insanity. Both work perfectly fine for each album, but the different production finish is noticeable. Fun fact, rawer is a word. Third, I feel that where the self-titled album has bigger singles and standout tracks, or at least more of them, Iowa is the more complete experience from beginning to end. It's that full album session as opposed opposed to a great album like Self-Titled that has banner anthems. Both are great, but that's another distinction I see. I put a poll on the YouTube community tab. As of August 7th, 2023, at over 4,000 votes, we had Iowa at 55% and Self-Titled at 45%. That's really close, and understandable as both albums contain some of Slipknot's best material. I'll leave a link up to the community poll in the pinned comment as well in case you want to vote even after the video is posted. I'm just glad there wasn't a way to vote for both. That really would have messed up the poll pretty bad. It also proves that both albums really are held in high regard for Slipknot fans and heavy music fans in general. It's nice to see so many people vote, but also that it's this close. There were also great comments on this post. Here are a select few.
I like both albums, but the first album was basically my childhood. Glad my parents raised me right. I would argue that ST highs are higher than most of Iowa's, save for a few tracks, especially Left Behind. But Iowa is more engaging and consistent in quality, hence why I prefer it over ST. Iowa easily. The Self-Titled suffers from a lot of new metal albums at the time of having production that hasn't aged well. Iowa doesn't have that problem, and it's a much more pure rawer metal album. I feel like Iowa is the Insomniac to their Dookie. The first album has more hooks and melody, while the follow-up is a lot more aggressive. I love the more straight-up death metal sound of Iowa, but Self-Titled is an iconic, genre-defining piece of art. Self-Titled is a no-skip in my eyes. Vol 3 also is, but Iowa remains their greatest album for me. Close call, but gotta pick Iowa. The hype for that album was intense back in 2001 and it didn't disappoint. Still holds up today in terms of sheer brutality. For me, the debut album, because without it we won't get the succeeding albums and the band itself. Still one of the albums I play from start to end. One of the best albums for me, period.
As for my personal preference, if I had to make a choice between the two, the slightest edge would go to Iowa. I love the Self-Titled, but I feel there are a few reasons that tip the argument in favor of the album named after the state known for cow tipping and voting and corn? First, the increased aggression and darker mood permeating Iowa is significant. That darkness was cathartic, but also stemmed from some extremely creative and innovative musicians who were trying to make their own monstrous album that was not just a carbon copy follow-up. Second, Iowa feels like a complete album from front to back. It's an entire listening experience with full immersion. That's not to say Self-Titled isn't a great album, but when comparing each album side by side, Iowa definitely sounds like it was meant to be a full picture as opposed to always picking out individual tracks all the time. Third, the production value helps accentuate the best parts about Slipknot in every aspect with Iowa. The raw sound that helped with the Self-Titled release was great, but Ross Robinson was then able to figure out how to make Slipknot's style and ability shine in that best possible light after more time with the Nine. Iowa proved that. That's just one person's opinion. I think both albums are fantastic and have stood the test of time, but I also think there are other fantastic albums from Slipknot, including We Are Not Your Kind, which was my favorite album in 2019. If you enjoyed this video and want me to do another on two different albums, let me know in the comments on what you'd like to see. Keep in mind that I would only do this on two good albums from the same band or artist. Making me choose between two terrible albums would be just me listing off what I don't like for 30 seconds until I give up. Not just on the video either, but just give up in general.